and cowpea variety in Nigeria. So, and then we'll be having this presentation with Mulu and our colleague from ISPRI Nigeria, Yasant, will be moderating this Brackbound seminar. So I'm going to give the floor to Yasant to make the starting introduction for this brown bag seminar series.
Right, thank you very much, Essen, and thank you everyone who is joining this seminar. As I mentioned earlier, this seminar is titled Dealing with Pests, Evaluating Impact of Using the Pod Borer Resistant Cowpea Variety in Nigeria. Also, like he mentioned, Dr. Kwaw Andam, who is the country program leader at IFPRI Abuja office, and Dr. Mulu Amare was a research fellow also at IFPRI, will be making this presentation. The seminar will take about an hour. The first 25 minutes of the time allocated for this seminar will be used for the presentation, while the rest of the time will focus on Q&A. The Q&A section, participants will be required to raise their hands and will be called upon to ask that question. But while this seminar is going on, the presentation is going on, you are free to just put down your questions, burning questions on the chat box. At this point, I will not waste much time. I would like to invite Dr. Kwaw Andam to make the presentation, after which he will pass the mic to Dr. Mulu. Please, if you have your mic, please mute your mic so we don't have any distraction. Thank you, and over to you, Kwaw.
Thank you very much, Hyacinth. So also from my side, a warm welcome to everyone. It's great that we have such a high participation. So thank you to colleagues from both inside and outside IFPRI for joining. We will have this presentation. Mulu and myself will share the presentation, but we have a whole range of colleagues listed here who are co-authors on this work, and we want to appreciate all of them. Also, thanks to donor USAID for funding this work. So as mentioned, the title is Dealing with Pests, the pest being the pod borer that attacks cowpea bean variety in Nigeria and other countries where farmers produce this crop. We will be presenting work that's ongoing, and so we have 3 sections to this. The first is to explain why we are conducting this impact evaluation. Secondly, to explain the methodology, and then Mulu will present some of the findings from a baseline survey that we completed earlier this year. I just want to check if I need to do anything on the screen here, or if you can all see clearly, because I see that whenever there are people coming in, it shows on the screen. Hopefully that's not too disruptive, but please let me know if it is. And so we have a bunch of evaluation questions here. I'll preface that by saying that this is the first randomized controlled trial rigorous impact evaluation of this type of technology, genetically modified food crop variety in Nigeria. This is a technology that is addressing an issue that really affects the productivity and production levels of the crop of cowpea. Farmers experience high levels of loss due to attacks by the pest, the pod borer, and therefore it is hoped that about 25% of farmers across northern Nigeria would adopt this new pod borer resistant variety, and by adopting that yields would go up by about 20%. So that's the that's the ambition for the donors and program implementers for this variety. And so in line with that, we have some evaluation questions for this impact evaluation. The first is to measure the productivity change, the gain in productivity for adopting the new variety compared with the conventional variety grown by farmers. The second is to look at the impact of adoption or use on insecticide applications. And the reason why I would like to measure this is that, as I mentioned earlier, this pest affects farmers across the region, and so farmers have to spray a number of times over the season, 7, 8 times, in order to control the pest. And so by adopting the variety, we expect to see a decrease in application of pesticides. That decrease would then, we expect, translate to better health outcomes for farm households. So that's the third question. And then the fourth question is looking at whether the use of PBR cowpea changes household consumption. And then lastly, we will be looking at impacts across gender, age, and other characteristics of households to see if there are any differential impacts. So these are the 5 main evaluation questions that we want to address with impact evaluation design. I'll now explain the methodology. We looked across northern Nigeria and selected 2 sites for our study. They are Kwara, which is here in the northwest of Nigeria, Kwara State, and Adamawa State in the northeast. We selected these states because the varieties were developed here in north central Nigeria, and mostly, at least in the first couple of years, promoted in those states. And we wanted to select states where there was currently low use at the beginning of the season, so that we could have some farmers who have not yet used the variety. These were also states where we had some partnerships which could help us with implementing the design. And also, as always in Nigeria, we had to be aware of the security situation and take cognizance of that. Right, so this is a series of steps just to explain the process. We selected farmers from, so the idea is to select farmers from those states, randomize at the community level, and that randomization ensures that we have a group of farmers that are treated, that are using the new variety, in a group that are using the conventional variety. And actually we have a third group that will be using the variety plus input. So you'll see this on the slide that's coming up. So this separation into the 2 different treatment groups plus a control group enables us to measure the difference between the outcomes for the treated and the controls, and then the that way the impacts can be attributed to the use of the variety, because we know that the final outcomes can be affected by several other factors, but randomization enables us to control for that. We are using a cluster randomized control trial, and in this type of evaluation, we understand that if you have farmers in the same cluster, they may in one cluster they may all respond in a way that's similar compared to farmers in a different cluster. And so we had to account for this this in our power calculations for the sample size. Next, this slide explains exactly how we did that. We used the LSMS 2018-2019. We looked at a certain level of significance that we want to measure. So we want to have, as in most studies, 95% confidence at the end. And using that, and the and the expected increase of 20% yield between those using and those using the variety and those using the conventional variety, we end up with a minimum sample size of 1,063, and that per calculations determined that then 5 farmers per cluster would be required. As you see, we have slightly more to account for any loss in our sample over time. This figure just shows what I've explained, the selection of the states, LGAs, local government areas selected from those states, and then randomization across those communities at this level. And then what we end up with is farmers in 3 different groups, which I'll explain in a minute. So our overall sample size is 1,400 farmers split up into the 2 different treatment groups and the control group. And so this is how the groups are set up. We have a first group here, which received the seed plus some inputs, fertilizer of different types, and actually one other input that you don't see here on this chart, because this is from an earlier picture, is an amount of pesticides to use. So that's the first treatment group of 400 farmers. The PBR cowpea plus input is what we are calling that group. Then we have a second group that received the PBR cowpea but no inputs. And then we have the control group, which received the conventional variety. So in summary, we have an evaluation design that over the past couple of years, we co-created with various stakeholders in Nigeria, including most importantly the implementer, that's the African Agricultural Technology Foundation, AATF, which is a partner for implementing the evaluation design. We are using mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative. I've already mentioned the clustered RCT design, and we aim to have, we've completed a baseline and we'll be having a midline evaluation later, midline survey, pardon me, later this year. So we have, you'll see soon some results from the baseline, which is confirming balance, ensuring that we have balance across the groups. And then we also have some qualitative fieldwork, which incidentally just finished this week. As I said earlier this year, we conducted the baseline survey across the LGAs that were selected, listing the households in November, and completed the survey in January, February, and we ended up with a data set of 1,399 farm households. This is a list of the various modules in this baseline survey, and it's a really rich data set because there are lots of assumptions on issues like pesticide use that I think this baseline data already helps us to have more information on. And my colleague Mulu will now present the key findings from the household survey. So Mulu, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kwaw. Yeah, okay, I'm going to explain or describe the key quantitative findings from our baseline survey. But to give you some updates, we did a list of households that produce cowpea in 2 states in 8 LGAs, and we are able to list about 13,500 cowpea producers in both states. And then across across all the states in 8 LGS. So we are able to also select 240, which is randomized, 240 communities from 8 LGS. So the main, I will try to explain the main findings. So which is not good news for us that it is in most dominantly male-headed households, but when we disaggregate by plot managers, we find like 46% of the plot managers are females. So about like 50% of household head have at least some secondary education, although around 41% have have no formal or elementary education, and more than 89% is dependent on agriculture as the main source of income. Next slide. Yeah, the average plot size of the cowpea in these two study areas are like 2 hectares in Adamawa and 4.3 hectares in Kaura State. So and this crop, the cowpea is like is intercropping, which is around 41% of plots are intercropped with maize. So around 36 minutes are away. The plots are 36 minutes away from the home. So there is a big difference in both states, and also it is reflected on yield and also in other aspects of main outcome variables. So the pesticide and herbicide use, it is almost 95% of farmers use pesticide, and 85% of the farmers use herbicide. And number of sprays per season is 4.7 liters, 4.7 times. And the quantity of pesticide used per hectare is 5.3 per hectare. And the cost of herbicide is around 25,000 naira, and the cost of pesticides are 24.2 thousand naira. So this could give us some information on how much the farmers are have a lot of expenses on herbicide and pesticide. So this technology could reduce the cost and also the quantity of pesticides used per hectare. So the main cowpea pests are based on self-reporting. Around 71%, they say cowpea aphids are the most is affected the cowpea production, and pod sucking bugs around 67%, and Maruca is around 53%. So the new technology could reduce the effect of the mainly on Maruca, and also some implications on other parts of in other parts of insects. So about 105 kg is discarded because of this main pests. So the cowpea yield is just it's on average is around 800 kg, and there is a big difference between the two states, Adamawa and Kaura, which is almost Adamawa is almost half of the Kaura yield. So this is the advantages we are able to see in two states with different yield, and also with different experience of shocks like battles, conflicts, which is highest in Adamawa compared to Kaura. Maybe this could also explain for the big difference between the yield, and also and also other reasons could explain this one. So it's just when you do some discrete results on this, further discrete results, there is a big difference between two states. So we have like the good news is just it's good to explain what is the reason behind this big difference, but at the same time it is very difficult to merge these two states. So about the production uses and percentage. So I think the cowpea is like more of commercial crop, which is like 54 are sold and 64 are sold in Kaura. So this indicates that cowpea is more commercial crops when compared with other crops in Nigeria. So we also try to collect data on household and higher level based on number of working days. So from this, we can see that cowpea uses more higher level compared with household level. So this could have some implication on on the difference between the two states. This could explain the yield difference between two states, because if there is some shocks that could reduce the height level, and then it can reflect to production and productivity. So we did also balancing tests based on main outcome variables. So we find there is no difference between, there is no significant difference between the treatment and the control. So this gives us some confidence for the next, if the impact, if there is an impact, this could be because of the intervention of the technology. So I think I will hand over to Kwaw for the conclusion and recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Mulu. So just before I conclude here, just a reminder that this is ongoing work. We really would value your inputs. I see some comments in the chat box. Can't see them now because I'm projecting, but we invite you to continue to comment there and also to ask questions at the end. So to conclude, the point Mulu just made, we see thankfully the balance across the treatment and control groups. Earlier, Mulu showed the pesticide use and also the costs to farmers, and so we see that this is actually a significant problem, and so we do expect that probably using the new variety can help to reduce harvest losses. That's the next 2 points, and flowing from that, then the question about whether income and health reduces also would be an interesting one to look at if there's reduced pesticide use, and that reduction in the cost of production as well. We saw a large volume of cowpea for sale, so it's a commercial crop, and we expect then that this can improvements in the value chain can also improve the overall food system. And our earlier result showing low share of female-headed households affects of our ability to measure those heterogeneous impacts, which is one of our ambitions. But we also see that it's about nearly half of plot managers are women. So in our final analysis, we can account for that. And then I mentioned that we have ongoing qualitative research, actually just concluding at the field level. It's the findings, these initial findings from that buttressing these points that we have already addressed, the high rate of pests infestation, which means that we think it's likely that farmers will actually use the new variety, and also that there's an enabling policy environment for using the new variety. And we've mentioned the cost issue. It's also coming out on we found on the quantitative side, also coming out in the qualitative work. So lastly, we are at the implementation stage now. We have, as you saw on the earlier slide, for the groups, the distribution of seeds and inputs, and we are working with the implementer AATF now, both on monitoring over the next few weeks, and also on in helping farmers to record costs and inputs that can help us to explain any findings at the end of the study. So that's my final slide. Let me hand back to Hyacinth to moderate. Thank you so much. So Hyacinth, back to you, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kwaw Andam Mulu, for that insightful presentation. Yeah, so this is the time for the Q&A. I think, the presenters actually managed the time, 25 minutes on the dot. So we'll have Q&A, like you mentioned. We'll have some questions that are coming up online and the chat box. I'll just read through for your response, and then we can take questions from the audience. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to ask your question, you just raise up your hand using the indicate using the reaction button here. So the first is from Gupta, says, was there any difference in the baseline pesticide sensitized use between the two regions, and also the degree of pest attacks?
Thanks, Hyacinth. Maybe we'll see if there are a few questions here. We can.
Yeah. So the from David Freeman says, very nice. You have balance, though will probably benefit from tables showing balance across all variables of interest at baseline. Household demographic characteristics, farm characteristics, input use, marketing share, gender dimension, and any other behavioral parameters you estimated. For instance, the risk preference. Went ahead to say, I assume that you are helping farmers to record cost of production in both the treatment and control group. Otherwise, you run the risk of reactivity effects. Okay, so I see Mulu responded, but I think I'll pass that over to you for general comment from the presenters.
Thanks, Hyacinth. Yeah, I was also reading in the chat box here. So the question about the differences in pesticide use between the two regions and also degree of pest attacks. I think Mulu has answered here that there are indeed significant differences across the two. David's question, whether we are helping farmers to record cost of production in both treatment and control groups. Yes, David, we are monitoring across both. And then the balancing test. So David has a question here. What didn't pass the balancing test? I will ask Mulu if you have those available to report. That would be good. Otherwise, David, we have to come back to you on more detailed response on that. And I also see a question from Lynn. Do you have different labor components disaggregated by gender? How does that relate to hired labor proportions? All right, so first, let me ask Mulu to come in here on any of these questions.
Okay, thank you, Ko. Thank you, David, and also Lian. Yeah, Shweta, and there is a big difference between two states in many of our variables, including yield, including pesticide use, and also in terms of plot size. And in many regards, there is a big difference between two states. And about the balancing test, yeah, I was looking at the baseline report. So we did for balancing tests for many characteristics, household characteristics, including household size. And I think there is no significant difference between the treatment and the control group, except the distance to plot, which is significant at 10%. And we have also information at gender disaggregated labor use. So I think for next we can include this. We can include, and we have also in the baseline report. Thank you. Yeah, maybe just
Kwaw
sorry. Okay, thank you, Hyacinth. Let me add
Please go ahead.
to, yeah. So yeah, we also do within state balance. So it's the result similar, the same. So there is no significant difference between the control and the treatment in most of the variables. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mulu and Kwaw. I think there's still another question from Gupta. Say it will be interesting to explore the attribute at district level, which might influence the adoption rate in the two regions differently. Would those see years are already different significantly? Likewise, things like access to market, it could be explored. I think that's well, like input and to your work comments that. So please, any other question? Over to everyone at the floor.
So, for Shweta's question, the point is about how it might affect the final outcomes, right? Not necessarily the use, because we are not.
Hello.
Please, can you mute yourself? We can hear you, Sheo.
Yeah, so Shweta, I was wondering, I mean, you right, thanks. You say that we see yields are different, and so you are thinking that other factors that are different across the two states, right, might affect the final outcome. So I'm just clarifying if you are concerned about the actual use by farmers where we have the encouragement for them to use, or if you are thinking about the final outcomes.
Yes, I'm basically thinking about, hi everyone, this is Shweta. So I'm basically wondering, about the final adoption rates only, which is probably, I think you would eventually explore when you reach that stage. But yeah, just thought that, because the two regions seem to be significantly different from each other, probably by choice you have, selected those regions. But like, yeah, eventually it would be really interesting to see how the adoption rates and how the intervention goes across the two regions, because a lot of these, like one of the treatment includes, for example, giving inputs like insecticides and so on. So things like access to market might also influence, like depending upon how closer you are located, your field or household is located to the markets. So yeah, just a thought basically. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, so we have worked with the implementer AATF to actually directly distribute the inputs to the groups. So in terms of the use, perhaps there wouldn't be much difference. But if, as you're saying, if there are those significant differences in market access, it might affect their additional use beyond what has been distributed, right? And may also then affect the final outcomes. That's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, I think Shay wanted to ask questions. Shay, please, you can go ahead if that's what you wanted to do, to ask your question.
Please, I'm having issue with my connection here. It is raining. But I want to look at, we are talking of yield, but we are just restricting ourselves to the input. And input application is not the only factor that control yield. One of the main factors that control yield is the weather of the area, that is the rainfall and also the soil type. And in the survey, I don't see anywhere the rainfall and the rain is being recorded, and rainfall and the soil is being taken into consideration. So without the soil and the weather rainfall pattern being taken into consideration, a lot of questions will be asked when the survey is published. So what can we do about that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Shay, for that question. So Kwaw, I think his concern is on some climatic factors.
Let me come in here, Hassan. Yes, I think as Shweta already mentioned, I think it's very interesting exercise to see or to explain what is the main reason behind this productivity gap between two states. So in regards to Shohu question, like we have trying to complement this survey with temperature, rainfall, and soil, and also some other conflict variables so that we can explain in case they are explaining for this productivity gap between two states. So we are working on that. Thank you.
And maybe just to add, Hyacin, but Shio's question, but would not expect, in general, if these factors affect, the communities in a similar way, then would not expect those to be to affect the actual evaluation findings, right? Because we are comparing the groups, the clusters in the groups in the same locality. So there's similarity across, except for the fact that some groups are receiving the inputs plus the PBR cowpea, another group only PBR cowpea, and another group just the conventional. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think one of the concerns of Shew is looking at the two regions. That's like Shweta mentioned earlier, and rainfall pattern in Adamawa and also in Kwara. I think that's where he's coming from, not necessarily within Kwara and then within Adamawa, if I get that correctly. Okay, so, another question, please. Seems this will be faster than we end earlier than planned. We'll still have enough time for this discussion. Like Kwaw mentioned from the beginning, this is a work in progress, and your input will be very, very key in refining even the analysis and the other activities that are ongoing and that are planned also for this project. Okay. So I don't see any other hands or question. I think at this point, I want to thank you all for being part of this, providing your insightful comments, and I believe will be useful to refining this study. And hopefully when the results are out, the final results are out, we'll still have this type of gathering to share the findings of this study. So thank you once again, and we'll have a lovely evening or morning. Thank you.
Thank you all, much appreciated.
Thank you, David, everyone. And
Thank you, David.
just to note that in the chat box, my email is there, especially for external participants if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.